Hi, well, welcome to the Marxian economics lecture on the tendency of profit rates to fall. Well, this is basically a chapter which focuses on only one aspect or one rule of the or one law, according to Marx, of the capitalist economic system, and that's basically the tendency of the profit rates to fall. Well, it is just one rule. However, we should note that this rule is one of the, according to Marx, the most important rule or the most important tendency of the capitalist system. And besides that, it is also one rule which is very controversial in Marxian school itself. Very big, very important economists like Lenin and Rosa Luxemburg in the school are basically thinking this law or this rule actually doesn't exist or not that much relevant or important even if it exists in the capitalist system. So this is why we will focus on this rule in one lecture. Although, of course, in regular sense, basically, actually, this lecture was connected with the depression and crisis lecture, where we see the crisis theory of the of Marx. Although, so, well, on that crisis theory, depression and crisis chapter, also this law will be important. But since basically, as topic-wise, these two topics are separated, I decided to have a separate video lecture on this subject. So, well, we should mention as a first thing, this law was presented by Marx in Capital Volume 3. And as I have already mentioned in the Profits and Prices chapter, Capital Volume 3 is a book which was basically published after Marx has died, edited by Engels, basically. So Marx was not able to defend any controversy created by this book himself, and as well, maybe we might say, as a result, well, he was not able to answer the questions related to this law, on this law, and basically, right after it published, this law was not that much welcomed by the by major Marxian economists. Maybe because many of them wanted to bring the capitalist system to a close by themselves. They didn't want an internal dynamic of the capitalist system will bring the system to a close or to an end. And this law is basically, although it is not something that will that directly describes the end of capitalist system, having one of the most important variable of the capitalist system, which always needs to stay high to continuously decrease, is something that will basically show that capitalist system has an internal dynamic that is detrimental, harmful, detrimental, deadly for the system itself. And we might say maybe even Engels, I mean, in one of his later work, when he basically describes the end of capitalism, he rather describes the instability of the capitalist system will bring its end, not the fall of profit rate, which is besides the instability, something that doom capitalists to have very low or zero profit rate, percent profit rate in future at a certain point, or at least profit rates will continuously decrease, which will continuously create additional and additional problems besides the instability, which means on average the system is fine. However, there are certain periods where system is basically experiences some harmful events, but those events pass, but then you live with them again more severely, and they pass, and then you live with them more severely. But this is something else. This means capitalist system has a continuously bad, continuous tendency, which basically is likely to make the system more and more difficult to serve. It makes this for the system more and more difficult to survive. So we should note that it was not only Marx who thought that profit rates in the capitalist system was doomed. Basically, Smith and Ricardo also thought that the capitalist system would basically experience profit rates, experience a decrease in growth rates. And Smith basically thought that this was because the system's big expansion and increase in profit rates, which was brought by it, was created by the expansion of trade, which allowed the workers to specialize on what they are best and specialize on certain labor tasks, while the problem is the trade can expand only with a limit. Basically, it can at most expand to the whole world, and once it has done that, then specialization of the labor or the specialization of certain tasks by different people will come to the end. Productivity will reach to its furthest limit, and after that, further increases in productivity will become more difficult, which will decrease growth rates and the profit rates in the system, basically. While for the Ricardo, basically capital accumulation will require a higher growth of population, higher amount of labor, which will basically lead to a growth in population, and growth of population will in the end increase the food prices because the new lands that are opened are inferior, and this will of course increase the wages. The rents will increase, wages will increase, and profits as a result will get squeezed. So these are Smith and Ricardo. Well, in Marx, as we have seen, the main problem of the capitalist system was increase in the organic composition of capital, C over V. And we should note, actually, there are different factors that are also potentially able to create crisis in the economic system, according to Marx. But as we have already seen up to this point, many aspects of the system, which are, according to many other economists, at least most economists actually, problematic, basically, are, according to Marx, of course, they are still problematic, but they are also essential features of the capitalist system. So capitalist system needs those things. Like monopolization or centralization of capital, something bad, but people don't like it, but capitalist system creates it, and in a way it's inevitable for the capitalist system to create the centralization of capital or monopolization aspect. Unemployment, again, capitalist system needs it in order to survive. But similarly, according to Marx, crises are needed by the capitalist system. Crises are the periods capitalist system solves its problems and re-establish itself. So the system needs crisis, which means the attempts to postpone the crisis are mainly not that much productive. You can basically you can postpone the crisis. That's possible. However, crisis will come at a later time with more severity, according to Marx, or according to Marxian analysis, we might say. And we will see that in coming chapters, basically. Well, while the C over V, the constant capital, the organic composition of capital, is not something that will create a crisis which will help capitalist system to replenish itself. Rather, it brings capitalist system closer and closer and closer to a point where it might end. As I said, Marx did not describe how the capitalist system will end, and I will briefly talk about the possibilities in the coming lectures on potential ends of the capitalist system. However, this problem is the thing which actually make that endpoint more possible, according to Marx, certainly. So, what are the factors that lead to decrease in the organic composition of capital? We have already talked about that. Mainly, the specific characteristic of constant capital and variable capital are responsible for that or lead that. Variable capital is limited, which means basically the population. Constant capital is there are different types of it, and even though one or two of the labor inputs might be limited, in general, it's almost not possible to have all non-labor inputs to be limited. So as a result, when capitalist companies expand, they tend to prefer production methods, new production methods, technological advancements which increase organic composition, which increase non-labor inputs relative to the labor inputs, according to Marx. Well, are there counter tendencies which prefer, which basically reverse this trend? There are two potential tendencies. One of them is the fall in price of commodities, which are C relative to other commodities. You might say also exchange value. I mean, if prices fall, that has actually a similar effect, because if prices of the non-labor commodities fell, but prices of the non-labor inputs fell, but other outputs have relatively same price, wages are relative to same, then even if physical quantity of the constant capital remains the same, now that constant capital will be cheaper relative to the variable capital. So if you give workers $10,000 in total, but in general non-labor inputs cost you per month, for example, also $10,000. If the amount of money you give to the workers remains the same, $10,000, but the amount of the value of the non-labor inputs fell to, let's say, $5,000, well, in that case, the ratio of C over V will rise because C will fall and V will remain the same, basically. Well, the second possibility is increase of the size of the potential labor. If the labor become more abundant because a new potential labor force joined to the labor force, and that potential labor force should not be the unemployed people because they are already part of the labor force and they are essential, as we have mentioned. But if women join to labor force, if immigrants join to labor force, if children join to labor force, if farmers join to labor force, in that case, labor become initially more abundant. And companies will prefer now the new production techniques that will increase the labor as an input with respect to other inputs for a while, and for a while C over V might fall. And that might be possible at the periods, by the way, where capitalist system can expand. As Rosa Luxemburg said, maybe that's one point which was actually really helping capitalism at the periods of the history when the economic system is expanding. New people will join the labor force, and as a result, labor become more abundant. And the most important tendency, the increase in C over V, might at these periods reverse, and that might help the profit rate to increase, basically. We will see why